Hello, community, and welcome back to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, founder and CEO of Dr. Anita Enterprises Incorporated. As a C-suite trusted advisor and board director, I help my clients reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. Today, we're continuing our real conversation from the C-suite with Dr. Beverlyn Mendez, COO at Easterseals Southern California. Welcome back, Dr. Mendez.
Thank you, Dr. Anita.
This time, I'd like to talk about a quote on your LinkedIn profile by Emily Landau, and it goes like this. The more than 1 billion disabled people who exist in this world are worthy of access and full inclusion today and tomorrow and next week and all month and next year, always. Why is that on your profile, Dr. Mendez?
Well, Emily is a personal hero of mine, and she's I love her book that's out, and we're highly promoting her book, Demystifying Disability. Emily is right. The Centers for Disease Control estimate that 1 in 4 adults has a disability. And up to 70% of those disabilities may not be apparent. So the reality is people with disabilities are all around us. They're in our workforce already. And talking about it builds inclusivity and leads to a healthier workforce and helps employers attract top talent. So we want to talk about disability, demystify it, and really support do what we can to support people with disabilities to enter in and stay in the workforce.
I'm thinking about a book entitled The Person You Mean to Be. And in that book, they talk about making the invisible visible. When you mention the fact that there are undetectable disabilities to the rest of us that don't have them, that comes to mind, making the invisible visible. How does that happen in the workforce? And how do we do that in a way that is sensitive and helps us manage intent with impact?
So I think if we think about what is currently offered within our workplaces, some organizations may have an EAP, for example, where there may be mental health support. And, we need to be able to talk about those things and enhance those and make sure that people have those supports available. And of course, as we know, particularly in communities of color, we really need to be talking about mental health and mental wellness and being able to be open about those. What supports people might need. So that, EAPs, strengthening those, taking a look at benefits, everything we look at, we need to look at with the lens of inclusion, benefits, ensuring that we have adequate healthcare benefits for our employees, accessibility in our workplaces, all those things that we do to support our customers and our communities should also be looked at in terms of our own staff.
You mentioned disabilities are not necessarily obvious or detectable to people who wouldn't have those. Can you give us some examples?
Sure. If you think about mental health disabilities, someone may have either current or history of something like depression or anxiety. Those are so commonplace now. There's neurodiversity, people who may be on the autism spectrum, people who have dyslexia. I don't know if you know this, Dr. Anita, but just this past year, LinkedIn added dyslexic thinking as a skill that you can select. And dictionary.com has also added a definition of that. So, this is how we're moving as a society to embrace the differences that people have and how those may make us even better in the workplace.
Give us a little bit more about dyslexic thinking. That's completely new to me.
So dyslexic thinking, and I'll actually broaden it even more to having a disability. People with disabilities are creative thinkers. They navigate challenges every single day. So dyslexic thinking, if you look at it, is people looking at things differently with a different different brain, different thinking, and also interpreting differently, and interpreting in such a way that's more accessible to more people. Someone who has dyslexic thinking may be able to prepare communications that are more understandable to a broader swath of our workforce. So it's really just flipping it on its ear, really, and looking at it as disability and traits that people have as positives in the workplace.
Those are absolutely positives. When we talk about, having team meetings and getting stuck in group think because everyone has the same, general experience and they see things the same way. That's why companies that have diversity, and in particular, when now you're talking about, what did you call it?
Dyslexic thinking.
Dyslexic thinking. You can obviously see, to me anyway, and it could be because this is what I do, but you can see how someone who thinks differently is going to stretch the rest of the team to see different possibilities, which is why when we talk about diversity of people and backgrounds and how the richness of someone else's background can add to the conversation and help us come up with solutions that are out of the box and really answer the mail. Why wouldn't companies see the benefit of that? What is taking so long, Dr. Mendez, for companies to embrace differences in all their beautiful forms? Help us.
Well, I think perhaps there's some fear associated with, as we spoke about in our first podcast about our language or about about intent. I think engaging and supporting and employing people with disabilities doesn't have to be expensive, but it has to be intentional.
Yes.
And so and then when we think about that, how are we, how does that impact our companies in a better way? Because the reality is, if 1 in 4 people are adults are disabled, we want to reach those communities. How do we reach them? We can't think around it and try to do it. We need people with disabilities at the table who are helping us to reach our communities and helping us to be able to speak to neurodiverse communities, to all the different communities that are out there that we want to engage in our companies. So I think it's perhaps it was fear in the past, but that's what's also been so exciting about the DE&I work that is happening now. And it really has opened up our thinking to different audiences. We are being intentional about all communities now. And this is just another one of those communities.
Intentionality is huge. It's intentionality that moves this work forward. And we're going to talk about intentionality more in our third conversation. Right now, though, you used the word fear a couple of times, and anyone who's listened to me for any amount of time knows that I am all into acronyms, either existing acronyms or creating my own. And the acronym that I heard years ago for fear was false evidence appearing real. If we think about that acronym, how does that apply to people's hesitancy to even talk about diversity in all its different formats, especially when it comes to diversity and disability?
Well, perhaps it has to do with preconceived ideas about a person with a disability, that they could potentially be have a negative impact on in our workplace, just like any other group. But I think that the realities are, when we look at it, the data shows that people with disabilities are strong workers. They are have better attendance in some cases, and their retention may be better. So all the indicators are there when we start to do the research that supporting and having people with disabilities in our workforce is really good for our companies, good for our bottom line, and again, good for how we outreach to our communities.
I'm thinking right now of a couple of young men in the sports world, both African American. One is still a kid and one is in his early 20s, I believe. The little boy is a golf phenom, and he was mentioned in Sports Illustrated. I think it's Sports Kid of the Year. Pardon me, but it's just not coming to me at the moment. And then there's another, the other gentleman, and he's in his 20s. He also has a form of autism, just like the young man, and he's blowing up the race car world. So to your point, when we overlook these other ways of people being in the world for fear based on preconceived notions, we are missing out on some phenomenal talent. How can we circumvent that?
Well, the great news is that there are some exciting resources that are out there now to help us. SHRM Foundation this year released a free 10-hour training and certificate program for HR professionals on how to recruit, retain, and engage a disabled workforce. And it's so exciting to see that companies are out there putting information out there that's evidence-based and has connections to tons of information. So I'd encourage organizations to take a look at that. It's called employingabilities.org is where they can find it. So there's great evidence. Again, there's great evidence resources out there for how to engage people in our workforce, people with disabilities.
Thank you, Dr. Mendez. We're going to dig even further into that in our next conversation. So community, you want to stick around for that. We're going to pause here and pick up with Dr. Mendez. In our next conversation, please come back because she's going to really help us understand how to move from awkward to ally. In the meantime, if you'd like to hear this real conversation from the C-suite with Dr. Beverlyn Mendez again, or any of my previous broadcasts, you know by now where to go, dranita.com. And at the top of the landing page in the center, you'll see the link to all my podcasts, Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita. Please remember to follow, like, and share. And if this podcast helps you reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different, please tell your network. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.